It's hard. Even literally just having the person in the room with you can be such a solace. Even if they're at the other end of the room and you just look over to them, that can be a solace, but it's not there for long distance. So it is hard, but you make of it what you will. You can make it a good thing in the end. So
beautiful.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Living Fullness. I'm Stina Constantine, and joining me as co-hosts on the podcast for this week is Father Sean Burns and Virtue Ministry's own social media and marketing guru, Grace Feltoe. Each week on the podcast, you'll hear us talk about a range of topics from virtue to relationships, comments on cultural shifts and lessons that we're learning as we go along, and we're so delighted that you've chosen to join us. So sit back and enjoy being part of a conversation with a few friends. Hey, Padre, we're doing something a little bit different this week.
Indeed we are. So one of the new things we're doing on the podcast is inviting co-hosts on the show to partake in a conversation in a particular topic. And so first cab off the rank is someone that I've known for many, many years, Grace Feltoe. So Grace, we lived about 500 meters away from each other. You were about 7 at the time, and I was about 16. And you had older brothers and sisters that I knew better than I knew yourself, but I'd come over there and there'd be little Grace playing the piano, or or causing some kind of mischief. No, you never caused mischief. I'm sure.
I was an angel, Father. Thank you.
You were an angel, of course. Exactly, you were an angel.
All 7-year-olds are, aren't they?
Yes.
That's right. No,
so you two go way back.
Way back, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's really cool to see the wonderful woman that is Grace Feltoe standing in front of me, and I can't help but think of 7-year-old Grace and be confronted by 20s Grace and be like, wow, this is incredible. So on the one hand, a great sense of awe and just real happiness, and on the other hand, a great sense of, oh my gosh, I'm old. Padre,
I
have been trying to tell you this. I have been trying to tell you this for many a years.
Yes,
I'm glad you finally had the realization.
The grey in my beard is showing me.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very glad to be on, and thank you so much for having me. So it's been such a joy, and I'm always amazed at how small the world is and how you can do full circle many times in different scenarios.
That's right.
Just like, being part of Living Fullness and Virtue Ministry. So
yeah,
it's really awesome. Yeah.
Maybe tell our community a bit about you, Grace, and also just to point out that, you can hear from Grace's voice and her accent. She's very much Australian, but also fill us in on where you are in the world at the moment too.
Yes, okay. So I am Australian, but I have moved to Europe. So I'm currently living in Portugal in near a beautiful city called Coimbra. And I can now proudly say that, it's my city, like all people from Coimbra do. And it's got one of the oldest universities in Europe. It's an incredible city. So I've moved over here for now and really enjoying the culture and honestly just being so close to everything in Europe. And that really suits me because I am, I guess what I could say is a sacred music specialist or something of the like. So I've been a professional cantor for years and running choirs. And even though I'm a bit of a slower pace of life at the moment, it's been really wonderful to chase some new dreams and to experience new cultures and new choirs and people. So that's been a joy. And I teach piano, and obviously I do the social media for Living Fullness and Virtue Ministry, which has been wonderful. It's been a wonderful connection to back home in Australia and, sort of keeping up working for God in various ways. So that's the lowdown. And I don't know what's around the corner. It's kind of exciting and scary all the time, but I've only been impressed so far. So it's been really good.
That's beautiful. Look at that.
Yeah.
I mean, we had early conversations before you moved to Portugal too, and it was very like, whoa, what's happening? What's God doing next? And so beautiful to
Yeah.
hear you say, I've been really impressed by the story that God's been
Yeah.
weaving so far. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. I always wanted to live in Europe. I just didn't expect it to be Portugal and just how things play out. But in a way, he's answering like wishes and dreams and prayers in always a way that you didn't quite expect. I always find that interesting about our good creator. So
That's how he rolls, isn't it? Yep.
yeah.
It's
quite
true.
funny.
It's true. It's how he paints. It's how he writes. It's how he creates. It's how he does all things.
Exactly.
So I guess for the topic of today, because the thing is that we've asked you, Grace, to come on board and be a co-host. You're not really a guest for us. You know, we know you. You're part of the team. And so we wanted to sort of have a bit of a chat and help us to have a chat about this particular topic that we've chosen for this week, which is long-distance relationships. And can they work? It's the $1 million question. Can they actually work? So I guess maybe starting with, because I mean that sound effect has like a bit of a story attached to it.
Yes, I feel like if I asked anyone, including you guys, what's your initial thought for long distance? Everyone says it's hard, or I can't do that, or just too difficult. And I think it's quite funny because they say it to me and I'm doing a long distance relationship. So I was like, well, it is possible. You can do it. It's got to be with the right person, and you have to think it's worth it. Even though you may not end up marrying this person, they've got to be someone you are genuinely considering, spending the rest of your life with. Otherwise, I don't think the commitment to do long distance would work. So, and I think it's a bit sad. People might always say it's just too hard, or I can't do that. And I thought, well, if you love someone, you'll do it, So that's my personal opinion anyway.
Yeah. Oh, it's such good boundary, I suppose, around thinking about whether you actually want to commit to a long distance relationship, and acknowledging that, long distance relationships are hard. They're really hard. But if you're in it with the right person and you're in it with the intention of knowing that it's going to be hard but willing to work at it, then it's worth pursuing.
Exactly.
If you think about it in a particular way, like all relationships are hard. Like there's always work in a relationship, So what you're doing in a long distance relationship is that there's just another dimension there of hard, which is in the sense of distance. So it adds a new layer of challenge to the relationship. But relationships are already hard in the sense that they require personal investment and work. And so the question is, well, am I willing to make this personal investment for this person? And as you've rightly pointed out, Grace, if I love the person, then this might be a challenge, but it's a challenge that I'm willing to rise to.
Yeah.
And I guess the interesting thing about loving a person too is that when you're in not everyone, but some people who will enter into a long distance relationship may not actually have known that person for very long to begin with. So the relationship may not be as established as other relationships, which means that you're also determining, am I actually in love with this person at the same time as being committed to a long distance relationship as well? So it kind of adds that extra element of discernment that, say, a committed couple who's living in the same town may be almost like further along that relationship path where they've actually decided, yes, we are going to stay committed to seeing this thing through, even though there may be some bumps in the road. But that luxury may not have been afforded to a long distance relationship yet.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes between seeing your significant other, it doesn't feel like you've progressed as much sometimes because of the distance. It almost feels like sometimes you're biding time between the visits. If you don't do it right, if you keep conversation and questioning up, it will progress in a sort of emotional, mental way. but sometimes it feels like we're just holding out for the next visit, you know?
Sure. Sure.
So, yeah, I agree. It can feel like that sometimes as well. Yeah, definitely.
May I throw an early spanner in the works or something? I don't know. Is there ever a time, or is there ever a situation in which a long distance relationship isn't going to be healthy? Because we're saying that there's a like, hey, there's a challenge here and that's a good thing. And long distance, if you want to make it work, it can work. That's awesome. So be it that the relationship began long distance, or be it that the relationship is sort of transferred to long distance, whichever the situation, we're saying, hey, this can actually be a good thing. Is there a situation in which we shouldn't enter into a long distance relationship?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I do agree there's times it probably isn't appropriate. And that would be if you're using the person as an emotional crutch to know that they're there but they're not there. I think that's really dangerous. And to have that comfort of I have somebody, but I don't have to do anything to love them or support them, especially long distance. You can sort of almost not care, maybe the odd message or whatever could suffice. So, yes, I think it could be dangerous for if one person could use another one emotionally, like as an emotional crutch. And that's when you really have to discern the person and get to know them really well. If communication drops off, then that would be a bad sign. Yeah.
If these mics weren't so expensive, I'd do a mic drop.
Yeah, 100%.
That was very well said.
Get to know your person. That's my advice.
Yes, definitely. I guess thinking out loud here, what you're asking, Padre, is also competing priorities too. If you've got two people who actually have two different trajectories in life, and then a long distance relationship is kind of thrown in to the mix, like you said, Grace, it can be so easy to just hang on to that person when another person moves away or you're moving to two different areas, because hey, you feel like you're still in a relationship, you're still getting that emotional satisfaction. But if you're actually heading in two different directions, then should you be in a relationship? If you're actually heading in two very different directions, is now the time to be in a relationship in this season? But also, if it is, should you maintain a relationship with this person if there's no possibility of that, the two lines sort of converging?
Yes, definitely. And even when you're like dating someone who you hoping the lines converge, like that's the plan, it can be hard because you are living two very different lives and figuring out how to bring them together, you know. That's hard enough with someone who's genuine, let alone trying to work with someone who's not in it to win it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess in that same vein then, what might be some other challenges that might come about in a long-distance relationship? That might be something we can have a bit of a chat about too.
Yeah.
What makes it hard?
I have an idea. Something that I struggle with personally, and yeah, I believe my boyfriend does too actually on this one, is FOMO, genuine FOMO. And we joke about FOMO all the time in life, but when you're actually dating someone and they're having a really wonderful time wherever they are, and you want to be there with them and they want you to be there with them, and you can't share the experience, and you're always trying to kind of give them the lowdown of what happened and the joys and the obviously there's bad times too, but it's really hard when there's actually joy and happiness happening on one end and maybe not for the other person. That has been such a struggle, and especially because I moved away, so all my friends will get to have wonderful times together and I'm not, and that's in friendship and in a relationship. It's quite interesting, and that's it's emotionally challenging every time that sort of thing happens, and I'm trying to every time give that to God and focus on the joys that I have that they're not having, and really balancing it out, going, the idea of the grass is always greener on the other side, that can happen a lot.
Yep.
So
Yep.
almost acknowledging, you go, yes, I feel like I'm definitely missing out. I want to have that as well, but I'm having experiences that they're not having as well, and I can share that with them later on. And giving it to God, it's actually sometimes a sacrifice. It's a more sacrificial thing that we give to God and treat it. I learned to treat it in a spiritual way to help me through those tough times.
Yeah.
And I think if you have a beautiful partner who's doing this long distance with you, they will try to make sure you don't feel like you're too left out. That's the thing. I think it's a challenge and it's hard, but it's been really nice to I guess, learn about the other person and how they are operating to make sure you feel good. And vice versa, how do I operate to make sure that they feel okay in the situations too? So, but yeah, FOMO, like I used to think that was a stupid term, but now I'm actually struggling with it.
Yeah.
You're able to bring your mutual joys that you're experiencing in a unique way to one another and uplift one another with those joys, those mutual experiences that you have, which are unique to your own situations. And so you're not living vicariously through someone else, but you're sharing the joy that you have as a person with this other person on the other side of the world. If I'm hearing you correctly, offering up the challenge and the difficulty of it to God and sharing that joy between one another of your unique individual experiences is kind of the thing that brings resolution to that, to some measure, at least.
Yeah, summed it up, yes. What about you, Father?
Well, I mean, bearing in mind that the last time I dated someone was in person some 16 or 17 years ago. So just
been a while.
Just bearing that in mind.
What do you think of it then? I mean, given it's so different to your own experience, what do you think of long distance relationships?
They confuse me. They confound me, and here's why they confound me. Right. So here's the confounding factor for me. It's that. So okay, this is a long-winded story.
Here we go. Bring on the ammo.
We're about to go on a journey, people. So
I have time.
So I've got this priest friend of mine who, whenever he texts, he always texts in the most efficient possible manner. So spelling just isn't an issue for him at all, right? and so if he wants to say okay, he will just write K and send it, right? Not because he's trying to convey some, I'm not happy sort of thing, but just because it's the quickest possible way of texting is by doing this shorthand, manners be damned kind of thing, right? And so in texting in that way, when you look at the text, you're like, I've asked him something and he's responded with K. And normally when you see K, it's like it's normally a statement of disapproval. Like it's it's sort of okay, but not really okay. Like it's okay, like it's so there's a little part of me that goes, is he actually okay? Because I can't see him, right? I've only got this letter in front of me to indicate that okay. So now I've grown used to him by now, and I just know that that's his shorthand. But the well, maybe he just really dislikes me. But but at any rate, I feel like a long distance relationship misses. It doesn't have that physical context. So in messages, even in phone calls, you're missing the person-to-person contact, which gives the full context of human communication. So you actually know how a person's going because you can see them and you can sort of see that their words are matching their body language and all of that, right? So it gives I think it can be really challenging to actually get to know each other when there's not that level of context there, that physical, tangible, in touch presence. I think that can be quite difficult. Not insurmountable. I have no doubt it's not insurmountable, but just a real challenge.
It is a challenge, and it's we have video call now, thank goodness, so you can actually see their face. Yeah. But it has taught so much about communication with the person. And it's interesting because they say a good marriage requires communication. So I treat it as almost a positive to build this foundation of communication. But I'm an open person, but if I'm upset, I tend to go quiet and I go closed off. It's quite interesting. You learn about yourself when you're dating someone, and when you're doing long distance, you can't do that because they can't see that you've done the whole quiet, you're upset thing. You know, I'm not the person that's going to shout it from the rooftops. I actually go into myself and really contemplate stuff. So I've had to learn to speak my feelings, and it's really hard, especially at first. And it's still hard now, but I'm getting better at it. You just be like, you know what? I had a really tough day and this happened and I'm feeling like this. And I feel like when you're in person, I don't know if most people need to do that or even initiate, because you can see they're a bit off today. I'll ask them how they're going, like genuinely ask them. And then it opens up the conversation and you feel like you can, if you need to bare your heart or whatever, you can do that. But to actually start saying, hey, I need to bare my heart, that's just really unnatural for people. But it's quite it's just really necessary long distance because they don't see that, and they may not spend, if you see sometimes, like if you're dating, you see them in the evening, you can tell that they've had a rough day. There's just signals and you don't have the signals. So you do have to learn to use words, whether it's, a text during the day saying, I'd like to talk tonight, or you just have to tell them when you're talking to them, how it's going. That has been hard, and it teaches you a lot about your own personality. How do I function when I'm happy, when I'm sad, when I'm, who knows, upset, like all the various emotions.
That's really cool.
And it's really hard. I don't like it, let's say, but it's actually I do see it as a good thing long term, because people, I think a lot of the time, and I'm not sure if it's just women, I can't say, but we expect other people to read our minds. When we're upset, it's like, can't you tell I'm upset? But some people are like, I didn't get that, so you have to explain. And I think that's actually a really good thing later down the track. If you do get married, that you have learned how to talk about what's going on in your head and your heart, and, maybe the rough patches that you might be going through.
Sure. And,
yeah, it's hard. Even literally just having the person in the room with you can be such a solace. Even if they're at the other end of the room and you just look over to them, that can be a solace, but it's not there for long distance. Yeah. So it is hard, but you make of it what you will. You can make it a good thing in the end. So
beautiful.
The thing that stands out to me is what you were saying about it. It feels so unnatural, and yet it takes away all the guesswork when you can just speak your mind, and you can just tell that, whether you're by long distance or in the same room with them, physically in the same room, just to be able to say, this is what's on my mind, this is what's on my heart right now, no guesswork.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. Let's just work together and move on.
Yeah.
But also, it also increases, in my own experience, it increases not only the level of vulnerability and intimacy between a couple in a relationship, but also the honesty and the trust too, because you can trust that if the other person is not okay, they will reach out to you. You don't have to be concerned about them every 15 seconds. Should I be checking in to make sure they're okay? You don't have to, because you can trust that they will tell you if they're not okay. And then also, in that example that you gave of, hey, I just need to talk this evening, but what if this evening's not a possibility for that other person and you really need them to be there? Well, now you've got conflict resolution to be able to come up with as well. So it creates these beautiful opportunities when you can have that honesty in a relationship, even with the distance or time difference or, whatever other complications might be added to long distance relationships.
Yes. All the complications.
All the complications. Tech failure. Cost. Let's add it all. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess maybe what are some of the other positives that come out of a long distance relationship then?
I mean, from someone who stands in an objective perspective, I imagine it would provide a very objective perspective, at least to some degree, insofar as the person isn't in your immediate vicinity. So you're not. There's not necessarily a being caught up in the moment or being caught up with someone being in your presence. It actually would require one to make a purposeful act of love, like to go ahead and see a long distance relationship actually come to fruition means that work has to be done, choices have to be made, and that requires a certain level of objectivity that sometimes is not always necessarily present when you have the other person right next to you, because there's a natural emotional component and a natural emotional bond that's just present there by virtue of that person's presence. But when that person is absent and you're actually working to make the relationship work, then there is a level of objectivity in, okay, I have to make this choice to love this person right now. And here's the context in which I have to make that choice. And I imagine it also provides a certain level of objectivity insofar as, okay, we're not making that choice right now. Like, that choice isn't being made at this stage by either of us or by one of us. And so it gives a much clearer indication of where the relationship is headed, because either both people are actually invested and making that choice to love, or it's very clearly not going to work. Yeah.
On point.
Yeah.
On point.
And I think a lot of people have the comfort of having their boyfriend or girlfriend there, even though they're seeing that this relationship isn't working out, or long-term it's not going to be a long-term investment, let's say. But they like the idea of being in a relationship and being able to go with someone to events or parties or, watch a movie with. And in a long distance, that's not an issue, or it's not a possibility even. So it's definitely about choosing the person. It's not about the comfort of the person, let's say.
Yeah, of what they can bring for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess then maybe to tie this conversation up, maybe having a think about one thing that can help a relationship to flourish when it's a long distance relationship. Like, one that's jumping out at me straight away is having in mind that this long distance is not forever. So I think sometimes people can enter into a long distance relationship with that complacency in mind of, well, we're just going to remain long distance, so I don't have to put effort in or too much effort in. I get, that comfort that you were talking about. I get that security of being in a relationship without too much of a commitment. And we're not really thinking about how are these two lives going to practically converge at any one point. Or it turns into a relationship of use where people are just meeting up from time to time to rekindle the passion of being in this relationship, but then really not having any kind of a relationship outside of that. So I think it's really important that keeping in mind that a long distance relationship is not forever, is not just about holding on to hope, especially when things get really hard, like when you really miss that person. It's not just about sitting with, well, this is not just forever and I'll just keep that in mind, but actually practically working towards that. Like what is the goal? Where do we see our lives actually working out? Is one of us going to have to move, or are we both moving? When are we looking at for that happening? Is that happening in a year, 10 years, 5 years? Like when is this thing going to converge? Because we can't sit in this long distance thing forever. Relationships were not made to be long distance. So we have to acknowledge that that's happening and plan for an end for that long distance relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you don't have a set, because life happens, so you might not have the plan perfect, you have to be always having the conversation. It's not a closed conversation, it's always an open conversation, and you have to both be very open about God's will and which, who's moving where? Are we both moving somewhere else? And a general timeline is very helpful. If there's no timeline, I don't think I could survive. So
Sure.
It wouldn't last. Yeah. It just feels like this sort of slice of hell. Otherwise, so not full hell, just a little bit.
It's like Dante's Inferno sort of thing going on here. Yeah.
Just a waft of it.
Just a waft of hell.
Yeah, because it can drive you a little bit. It can drive you a little bit crazy sometimes. So you do have to think it's not forever. It's not forever.
No.
So anyway.
No.
My thing, I think, for really helping, firstly, take the pressure off yourself sometimes when you're deciding at a long distance relationship is prayer. And I always did this even in person. We would go to mass together and adoration and things like that. And I always would look towards the Eucharist or the tabernacle in the church and think, this is a triangle. This isn't me and him. It's a three-way, and we're both got our eyes on you. It was perfect sort of image when I was at church. But then trying to take that as a long distance thing and always reminding me that I can pray and that assists in my relationship. It's not like they're two separate things. So there's always three in this relationship. There's me, him, and God. And keeping that in mind. And if, sometimes you're like, I'm discerning, but it's really hard. I haven't seen them in ages. How do I know? How do you know? But if you just keep your prayer life up and you keep praying for them, and they hopefully keep praying for you and praying for your own discernment, keeping a clear mind, then it does help. Honestly, I actually can say categorically it does help, especially if you're in a confused time or it's difficult. So always the triangle of a relationship.
And look, jumping off the back of that, pray together. There's no reason why you can't pray over a phone call or over a Zoom call, and it's not the same as being in person, but the wills are still there. The will to be praying for each other, with each other, that still is there, and so do that together, and as a reminder to both that, as you rightly say, this isn't a straight line between one person and another. There's a line between one person and another, and then two lines running parallel straight back to God, and
Yeah.
So yeah. But no, that's really awesome. A really awesome discussion about long distance relationship. One that I was surprised that I can contribute to in any meaningful way. So,
Oh, dear. I think probably we had a bit
No,
more
it's
faith in
been-
you than you did, Padre, there.
No, it's great to have this conversation because honestly, when when the relationship entered long distance, it's like, where is some assistance? Who's talking about it in a Christian context? And there's not much. There's not much at all. And so I hope it helps and contributes to other people's lives. Not saying I've, run the race, but I've learnt some things along the way, and being able to share thoughts for other people is, I think, crucial. Now that we have technology, now that people do move around a lot, it's getting it from a wholesome, godly perspective is crucial, I think.
Yeah,
Awesome.
well said.
Awesome.
Well said. Awesome. Well, like exactly as Grace said, I hope you guys have taken something from this episode that was useful or helpful, or even just thinking about it a little bit differently as well, hearing from 3 different perspectives on long distance relationships too. So I guess to end off the episode, as we always do, truth, beauty and goodness. And we might start with you, Grace.
Woo-hoo. Okay. I was in the beautiful city of Paris last week. It was glorious. And I think a real take home was going into Sacré-Cœur Basilica, and they have perpetual adoration there. It's been going on for a very, very long time. I can't tell you how many years, but over 100 years. And we are entering the basilica and seeing the monstrance there right up high, very large. It was phenomenal, and sitting there and praying, and there's hundreds of people going through at once, and yet there's a prayerful aspect to it, that you hear noises in the background, but everyone kept pretty quiet for the huge amount of people, and I could sit there and pray, and it was phenomenal. That was a real glorious moment. So
Wow.
that's my truth, beauty and goodness. Yes.
That is so cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh, wow.
Stina?
What about you, Padre? Oh, no.
Okay.
I hand it over to you first.
So mine is the bishop has written a pastoral letter, and in doing so, he's also a pastoral letter from a bishop is like a letter to his diocese about a particular issue, and so for him, he's written this pastoral letter on the sacrament of confession, and he's also given alongside this pastoral letter a mandate to all the clergy to preach for the first 3 weeks of Lent on an aspect of the sacrament of confession. And he's giving us material to help us do that. And it's been so cool to get a mandate from the bishop to say, I want you, as a matter of urgency, I want you to preach on the sacrament of confession, and I'm going to write a letter about it to beg the people of God to return to this great sacrament. It's like, all right, this man's talking my language. So it's just been awesome to see that kind of leadership. It was just so beautiful. So if you're in this diocese, in the Wagga Wagga diocese, and you want to get a hold of that letter, it's on the diocesan website. And if you're not from the diocese and you want to get a hold of the letter, it's on the diocesan website. So go to type in Wagga Wagga diocese. Wherever you are in the world, I promise you there's only one Wagga Wagga diocese. So WAGGA, and then repeat that, and then you've go and have a look. Yeah.
And
awesome.
Drop the hint to go to confession. Yo.
Yeah.
And that too.
Make use of it.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Bishop sounds
Stina.
on fire.
What about you, Stina? What about you?
Yeah, for me, it's a book that I've just finished. I read Henry Nouwen's book called Return of the Prodigal Son. which was awesome. So obviously it's taking from the parable of the prodigal son, and Henry Nouwen sort of goes through his own personal story of how this particular artwork by Rembrandt struck him and the impact that it had on him as he meditated on this particular artwork, and the different characters that are actually in that particular artwork, because you think it's three, you think it's the father, the younger son and the older son, but actually there's some other couple of characters in there too, and what's going on there. And he walks you through his own personal meditations of what he's learnt from each of them and gets you to think about who you are in relation to that parable as well, which is quite powerful. You walk in, for me, certainly I walked in thinking I was one, and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely this one. This is where I'm going to relate, and then realize, oh, that's not where I'm at all. Oh my goodness. Plenty of tears shed. So if you're looking for something deep and meaningful, and pick it up. It is good. Really, really good. So Henry Nouwen's Return of the Prodigal Son.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Very good. Thank you, Stina.
Yeah. Pleasure. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Living Fullness. Please make sure that you have and are following all of our social media handles. So jump over to Facebook, like and follow us over there, and jump over to our Instagram pages on Virtue Ministry and Living Fullness, so that you're staying on top of everything that's happening and watching out to see what Grace does next too. She's super active on all of those social media handles. So stay tuned for some stuff that's coming out there. But also we are looking for 5 Patreon supporters, 5 people to commit to $50 a month, which will help us to actually cover all of our editing costs that currently is sitting on my shoulders. So if we can get 5 additional people to jump on and sponsor us, donate on a monthly basis on Patreon, you'd be making a huge difference to the amount of time and energy that we can redirect into more constructive and into creative content creation. So that would be super awesome if that is something that you can contribute. But we will catch you as always next week. So until then, know of our love and prayers.
God bless.